I'm so excited that we're finally at part 2 of this course. This is really where the journey begins. The messes get made, the skills get learned, the food gets eaten and smeared and dropped and squished in the hair, and this is going to be a lot of fun. First, let's take a look at a pretty common way that parents spoon feed their babies, and I'll introduce an alternative that I recommend. So you see with a little puree on the spoon, I bring the spoon to baby's mouth despite her clear signals that she's not really interested. Then I push the food in and scrape the spoon on the back of her top gums to put the food in her mouth. Any food that comes back out, I scrape with the spoon to clean up. I might re-offer that drooly bite that I just scraped off her face, or I might just reload the spoon and keep going. Look familiar? Now, this isn't a wrong or horrible way to feed your baby, and it's really quite normal. I really want to introduce a concept to you that not many people talk about, and that's baby-led spoon feeding. Now, I know the baby-led feeding movement tends to be associated with giving your baby solids as first foods, but there is absolutely no reason why spoon-feeding purees can't be baby-led. Let's take a look at what baby-led spoon feeding looks like. Baby's holding the spoon and doing a lot of things with it. This is actually her first meal, so she's exploring and she's curious and she's watching me model for her how I put the spoon in my mouth. She might give it a try on her own terms. In this case, it was just a little tiny taste. I will add here that in the first weeks of feeding, unrushed meal times at home are really best for your baby. Baby-led spoon feeding might also look like holding the spoon with your baby and gently helping him to scoop a bite or to steer the spoon into his open mouth. So let's flash forward a few weeks and look at this same baby, a little bit older, more experienced, and you can see she's more interested in foods. You may be thinking that baby-led spoon feeding looks messy, and it is. It's definitely messier than you spoon feeding your baby. But making messes is important sensory learning for your baby and a very healthy way to interact with foods as a new eater. And like we've talked about, a little preparation goes a long way towards handling those messes. Baby-led spoon feeding does involve lots of rinsing of spoons that are dropped to the floor or grabbing a backup spoon to keep the meal rolling, so be prepared for that. Why do I think that baby-led spoon feeding is important? Well, as a baby's first experience with foods, baby-led spoon feeding can really help foster positive feelings about mealtimes. It can help baby direct how much and how fast he eats. It leads to a baby who's independent in spoon feeding even before a year old. And when your baby reaches toddlerhood, which will happen in the blink of an eye, you'll more fully appreciate how developmentally imperative it is to foster your child's sense of independence and control. And as you can see, this can start at mealtimes even before your little one is a toddler. You don't have to practice baby-led spoon feeding at every single feeding, or for an entire feeding. Let's be real, there are times when messes must be kept to a minimum, like when you're visiting someone else's home, or when baby's dressed up for a special occasion, maybe when you're out at a restaurant, or when you have to leave the house right after a meal. Most meals will likely be a blend of baby-led spoon feeding and then what I like to call respectful spoon feeding by a parent. Respectful spoon feeding means that you hold the spoon and feed baby while being very responsive to his cues. Here are some important ground rules for baby-led and respectful spoon feeding. No sneaking food in when your baby's smiling or laughing or opening his mouth for any reason other than to receive the bite of food that you are offering to him. No restraining baby's hands or arms. If they're in the way of his mouth, it's very likely his way of refusing a bite. Maybe he's saying he's not ready yet, or that he wants to do it himself, or that he's done eating. No shoving or forcing food into a mouth that's not open. It's really important that we respect the mouth as an entryway into the body. If you're trying to get baby interested in tasting food, as long as he's not turning away or pushing the spoon away, you can gently tap a spoon on his lips to put a little bit of food there for him to taste, or maybe to wipe away with his hand. So you can see here that I'm waiting for baby's signals that this is okay before I proceed. She seems pretty indifferent, so I tap her top lip and she chooses to lick it off. Another rule for baby-led and respectful spoon feeding is no scraping food off the spoon onto the back of baby's upper gums. Instead, we want to keep the spoon level and place it on your little one's tongue. This is really for two reasons. We want to help baby move beyond suckling food from the spoon. Suckling is the oral motor skill that infants use when they're nursing or taking a bottle. By placing the spoon on his tongue, you invite baby to use more mature oral motor skills. You also don't want to encourage baby to lift his head at the end of bites. Scraping the spoon upward tends to do that. Another guideline to remember is no wrestling the spoon back from baby, and this one can be tricky. Ask for the spoon back and wait for baby to drop it onto his tray. You can try to take it from him gently, but if he doesn't give it up easily, give him more time and try again in a minute or so. I also like to just offer hand-over-hand help to dip the spoon back in a bowl of food together so that baby doesn't have to let it go between bites. I also recommend keeping a backup spoon handy to use for a bite or two of respectful spoon feeding while he plays with the spoon that he has. Another tricky rule to follow for a lot of us as parents is no obsessive spooning of food off the face. It's okay to have a messy chin for a few bites. It's not that you'll never do this. It's almost in our DNA as parents to catch that huge glob of yogurt that's just dangling from the chin. But try to refrain from that spooning of food off the face after every bite. If you think about it, it can get really confusing for a baby who's learning to open his mouth and to anticipate food when a spoon comes near. And along the same lines, no wiping the face every bite or two. Again, you definitely may have some mid-meal wipe-ups, but letting your baby get messy is an important developmental part of him learning to eat. In fact, learning to feel food on the face and on the lips that baby can't see is an important sensory processing milestone. And it can trigger new oral motor skills like licking around the mouth or sucking the lips. That might feel like a lot of rules, but if you really adopt the mentality of baby-led and respectful spoon feeding at mealtimes, most of those rules just naturally make sense. Our key takeaway is that early feeding should be an experience you share and you enjoy with your child, not something you do to him. On to our next lesson, and this one's a biggie. We'll be tackling exactly how to transition baby through different textures of foods and in what order. So I'll meet you in lesson 2.